Hello, and a very warm welcome to this podcast from Management Futures. I'm Hugh Reynolds, Head of Learner Experience and Engagement, and in this mini-series I'm going to have a 4-part conversation with my colleague and friend John Bull. He's MF's Director of High Performance, and we'll meet John in a moment and we'll explain why we're so excited to talk together about adaptive leadership. But if you'd like to find out more about our work, please get in touch. You can find our details on the team page at www.managementfutures.co.uk, along with all sorts of helpful insights, tools, videos and resources. Thanks so much for tuning in to us, to who we are and to what we do. We really hope you enjoy this chat. Okay, John, we're at the climax of our series of conversations around adaptive leadership, adaptive challenges, and we've had a really good time talking about what adaptive leadership is and some of the skills that adaptive leaders need. We've also looked at the traps that leaders trying to be adaptive leaders might fall into. And I wanted to round off with some practical takeaways or recommendations, so advice, wisdom from yourself around what we could do in this space. So if I'm really interested in this, what can I go and do? The first thing that I've jotted down that you might advise people about is to raise awareness around the importance of adaptive leadership. Can you just recap that or tell us what the importance of raising awareness within your team and around the place that you work?
Yeah, so I think I think a common challenge, if we talk about it from the perspective of a senior team, common challenge to pretty much every senior team, including ours actually, would be you're trying to split your time between adding value for today and adding value for tomorrow, or one of our clients calls it run versus change. Right now, I think most of us would recognize it's really easy to just the change element just get pushed out with the day-to-day run. So I think the first step is to create some space to talk about adaptive leadership and to take stock of where we are with that, the capacity to almost just stand back and take an audit and get the senior team thinking about where we are with that, to shine a light on it.
Does it always start with the senior team? I'm taken that adaptive leadership isn't part of this authoritative leadership sort of hierarchical model. So I'm interested that you mentioned the senior team then.
No, I think any leadership team though, because it's in some ways, the leadership team needs to address it first. It doesn't need to be the senior leadership team, but the leadership team in a normal organization sets the agenda. They send out lots of ideas. And so if the organization is going to get better at adapting, I think you're going to create space for it by getting a team to stand back and go, well, how are we doing on the balance of this between leading for execution and leading for adaptation?
Got it. So even if you stood on the balcony, you're bringing some of those, we talked about sort of outliers or seeing a wider pool of people that are involved without the leadership team being on board and being fully briefed and fully behind any adaptive change. It ain't going to happen.
No, when we say leadership team, actually, some of the best work we've done in this has very much been the wider leadership team. So not the immediate senior management team, 7 or 8 people, but often going the next sort of layer of people as well, so 20, 30 engaged in the conversation around it.
How would you introduce it? How, if we're raising awareness, we're introducing these concepts, how would you introduce that?
I think just resonating with people. I heard a speaker say relatively recently, isn't it just really crazy right now? And I think that just resonates. I think it would just be calling as it is, right? I don't know if those listening can resonate, but we certainly feel it. The amount of change, the coming from different directions, how many factors. I think just calling that out, saying and I, a phrase you and I referred to and looked at in one of the earlier conversations. In any time of really disruptive change, there'll be some organizations that adapt, there'll be a lot that don't, and there'll be some new organizations that start up and
Mhm.
saying, I don't know about you, but I'm really keen we're in the first category.
Yeah,
We know there's a lot going on. We need to take some time to reflect on how ready are we and how prepared are we to be one of the organizations that's going to navigate this really, really well.
sure. So lean into the situation, lean into some of that VUCA sort of volatility and complexity that we're all dealing with
Yeah,
in business and society and our organizations. And may well find that we're leaning on an open door with
I
people
think
coming
I
to
think
listen
so,
to us
Hugh.
more.
Yeah, and I like your phrase of pushing on an open door or leaning on an open door because I think it is just about creating some space,
Mm,
articulating. Maybe it's a prominent leader articulating the why we're doing it, but
yeah.
I think it will be an open door. I think everyone will see that need
Mhm.
immediately.
So once they've seen the need, and we're gonna need to build some skills. What does that mean in practice? I'm almost spoilt for choice, in terms of the things, because it encompasses many different aspects, this notion of adaptive leadership. And it feels like I need a big toolkit of skills, right? So what does that mean in practice to build the
Yeah, it's
skills?
I guess the work we've been trying to do over this last couple of years is yes, it is a big toolkit, but to really simplify that into some quite clear themes, as we've talked about in
Mhm.
the previous conversations. I think when we talk about building skills, I think step one is to set out what the skills are and what the traps are and raise some awareness around that. So it's kind of to give people a model of, okay, what's to use your analogy of the toolkit, if we're going on a climb,
Mhm.
what's in the bag,
Yeah.
what have I got here? And people to kind of take stock of how familiar I am, which of those am I, which of the traps do I recognize I do fall into? I need some support around, I need some skills around, which are my strengths. So understanding what the skills are to raise awareness of where those skills are at and then help them build those skills further.
Mhm.
Um,
So there's a sort of diagnosis of the situation or
yep,
what's particularly lacking in an organization, or if that's too strong a word,
yep,
things that have room for development around those skill sets. Many of which, and this is a theme that I've been threading through our conversations, whether you wanted it or not, John, was that things are coming back from our heritage as management futures in things like psychological safety, courageous conversations, these things that we train in, they're all playing into this aspect of adaptive leadership. And many organizations listening to this, people from those organizations will notice things that they're already good at and some
yeah,
things
yeah.
that they might want to apply more pressure to.
Yeah, if you take one of those, coaching, we talk about coaching at the heart of everything we do, but I think I think coaching often really comes to life when you have a really clear application
Mm,
for it. This is one application where coaching is, and we haven't talked a lot about it yet, but it's going to be at the front of it, right? So
mm,
because of because what adaptive leadership is about is the leader is not the expert. The leader is really leading a process for tapping into that expertise and that experimentation. So
yeah.
coaching is really, really powerful to that, to even debriefing. So yeah, I bringing skills that you might already have developed or be talking about, but putting a very specific application to it.
Mhm.
This is about how do we help the organization spot, adapt, implement, as some of the
Yeah.
things we've talked about earlier on. And it can be very, that it can be simple. I mean, I think in the ideal world, that's where you're doing an experiential event that gives
Mhm.
a lot of enjoyment, but gives a real opportunity to bring those skills to life, to people to kind of come front to front with actually, in that situation, my skills aren't quite where they need to.
Mhm.
But in a really short version, every time we've shared with clients the four traps and got them to think about the four traps, they've stuck and really resonated.
Right.
And people have come back and go, that's super useful. I'm seeing that play out. I'm going to be much more alert to that.
Great. And thanks so much for raising that synergy between the coaching work that we do and the leadership skills work that we do. It gives me a great opportunity to plug Coaching Plus and talk about areas where we're linked up in the coaching that we do and the skills development sessions that we run, specific to things that have come up in coaching or coaching around things that are specific needs for people in organizations. So thanks for that opportunity. John, I'm going to move us on though. We've talked quite a lot about spotting. We've talked about spotting elephants. So these are things that we might feel initial discomfort about talking around. We've talked about spotting things early and identifying adaptive challenges. So those ones that we need to bring our adaptive leadership
Yeah,
skills
where we
to.
don't have a strategy that
Well, we
works. Yeah,
exactly. So great recap as well. So where we can't apply sort of technical or authoritative experience to it,
yep.
we need to look at in more depth about that complex issue and bring more people in. And I'm interested in the word priority because one of the recommendations
Mm.
that I spotted in the work you've been writing around
Mm.
this is that we need to prioritize our most important adaptive challenges. How do we do that? How do I go about prioritizing when there's so much going on?
Um, the way we've seen it work most effectively is to actually again just borrow from a very well-trodden approach to risk analysis, right? So to is to look at, if you're looking at scenarios, is to look at how high is the probability that this will happen and what will be the impact. So I think it's looking at, if we don't adapt to this, what impact is it going to have? And I think there's two elements of how big is that impact, so how disruptive, how important is it for us to adapt, and then secondly, how quickly do we need to respond
Mhm.
to this?
So bringing some attention to sort of almost on a spreadsheet or rationalizing it, identifying it, spending time working out the consequences and the opportunity costs as well, I guess, around not attending to certain things. You'd recommend an open discussion around that.
Yeah, it's looking at, if we don't address this, what's going to really hold us back.
Yeah,
And then I think the urgency comes into that, within that.
sure. And I loved how you didn't apply urgency there. You were thinking, and I love it when I see you thinking. And we talk about awesome silencing. We never have an awkward silence in the things that we do. We always have awesome silences while you were thinking that through. So thank you for letting me push you on that one. Let's jump to another recommendation, which is to actually use those skills. Seems obvious because if we don't use a skill, and we lose our ability and our craft, really. So how do we go about using those skills once we've got them?
Yeah, for me, it's more of a mindset of using that we're facing an adaptive challenge, to say we're going to use this to get really good at dealing with um, ad how to become more adaptive. And it's just a positive frame to put on an uncomfortable. We've with MMF, actually, there have been times where we've had to adapt to
Mm,
change quite quickly. And I think to say we're not only going to figure out how to respond to this, but we're going to use this challenge to get better at responding to what's coming further down
mm,
the line, to
mm,
become, because I think adaptation, if you have a really strong adaptive muscle, it gives you a lot of confidence that you can deal with what's going to come. I think it's one of the things, if you look at people who are just really confident, it's that experience to know I can deal with whatever's going to come. I can, so I think it's, what I mean by using the skill is just framing a particular adaptive challenge as it's practicing performing on it
mm,
and building those. So one of the skills we talk a lot about, Hugh, is debriefing, but it would be doing debriefing really deliberately to not only learn from the experience, but learn about how to do debriefing better.
mm. There's a great sort of balance there between the deliberate things, the known things that work, and the unknown things. And I'm really taken with an example you gave around a partner we're working with who knows that in the next 12 months there's going to be a couple of things that are going to really shake their area of the business. They're going to really shake their industry, and they don't know what they are, but they definitely want to get prepared for it. Have I got that right? Is that because it
Yeah.
really
So what?
struck me that they were doing something
Yeah.
about something they didn't
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
about.
Yeah. So if you go back to one of the phrases we used in an earlier conversation is productive paranoia, and if you dig
Mm,
underneath it, so Jim Collins voiced that, but actually Intel talk about only the paranoid survive, etc., etc. If you dig underneath that, there's a concept of black swan events, right? So an event that might be 1 in 1,000 event. It's really, really unlikely it's going to happen. So preparing for that, prioritizing that would be stupid. It would be crazy.
mhm,
But what you should prioritize is that one of those is going to happen. It's very unlikely that a specific one is going to happen. We're not going to prepare for that, but something is going to happen. So what you look at really good adaptive organizations do is build buffer in. They build allowance in to allow for the unanticipated. When I was pausing earlier on our
mm,
conversation, the example that was in my head, and I was choosing whether to share it or not, but I will now, was a really good example of very important adaptive live leadership, which was the IMAX film of Everest. So
mhm,
there was a project to put on an IMAX film climbing Everest, which happened to coincide with the worst day in climbing history on Everest, of 8 people being lost, including a Kiwi and actually someone known to my sister, Rob Hall, who's one of the climbing leaders. The chap who was leading the filming project had built in contingency for 4 attempts on
mhm.
Everest and had bought up enough food and supplies to allow for 4 attempts. So they were about to climb Everest. He looked down, he saw a snake of 50 people coming up, and just made a call and just constantly asking himself the what if question. Okay, if we need to get off this mountain really, really quickly, we're not going to do that with 50 inexperienced climbers. So he made a call in that moment. I'm I, I know I can go down. I've got at least 3 other goes at this to come off the mountain.
So it's sort of lowered the stakes or spread the stakes out a bit by having those other options. Also, would refer people to earlier in our conversations where you were talking about the Chilean mining
Mm.
incident, where amazing rescue, where experimentation was at the heart of that, with trying three, I believe he said 3 different techniques to get down to rescue those miners. So another example of that empirical mindset, that learning and testing. And I think that would be a great way to end this conversation, John. But I'm going to just give you the opportunity to tell us something else. Like if there was just one thing that we did as a as a
Yeah,
network, as a learning community,
um,
after hearing you speak, what would that be? What would you
so
want to
I
leave?
love the case study around the Chilean mining rescue. There's a brilliant case study that Amy Evanson and a number of colleagues worked on. It's fascinating to read, actually. And as you've been at pains to point out, it draws on lots of different aspects of
Mm,
leadership. But I'll close on one learning from that, which is, I think, caps a lot of what we would talk about in adaptive leadership. It's about openness. So, I know when I use the phrase situational humility, it really
mm,
resonated with you. I think if there's one thing, it's that kind of being present and open to see to be able to very quickly spot. So a great example from the Chilean mining rescue is the openness. So the project leader, there was an incident where an undergraduate from somewhere in America literally arrived at the gates, knocking on the gates, crowds of media around,
mhm,
claiming that he'd come up with an innovation that he thought would make the drilling faster. Okay.
mhm,
I don't think I would have responded this way. But what the project leader did was go, sure, let's try that. Because he knows that he needs any, it's that empirical. I need anything possible. I have no idea how we're going to do this. I have to say, what I think I would have done is probably not even gone and met and spoken with the person. I would have just sent something to get rid of that distraction. I think it's super powerful. So it's estimated that what the innovation was having a drill rather than just spinning, it was oscillating up and down. It's estimated that took something like 8 days off the time that they broke through and got first contact with the miners underground. 8 days, it's massive.
Amazing.
So I think if there's one thing that summarizes what is the mindset, what's the shift, what's the skills, it's about being that zooming out and being open and alert and much more in touch with the external environment, maybe contrasted with we talked about earlier on about pairing that with then analyzing how am I responding to that and where are my biases maybe getting in the way of it.
Yeah, that's so fascinating, John, and such a powerful note to end on. I can't resist mentioning that, we've been talking about getting on the balcony, and that if we're going to stay open and we're going to deal with these things, we need to get off the balcony as well. Right? It's about getting back down into people and those interactions.
To zoom out, but then once again, it's really one of the misconceptions. This isn't just about experimenting. Once you've done, you do the experimenting is a means to an end to get clear on what works. Once you're back and having a strategy that works, you're right.
Yeah.
Get off the balcony and start acting.
Well, I don't know if you've got a balcony there, John, but we'll find one for you. And thank you ever so much.
I have a tree that I could
much more you actually, mate. Getting into nature, getting up that tree, and do be careful when you're up there. And thank you so much for come down from your tree and let's make another podcast soon, because I've really enjoyed our conversations. And thank you everybody for listening to these as well. We'll put them out in various ways on our media channels. But I know however people are getting this, I know it will be sparking conversations within their organisations. So thanks very much indeed for that, John.
Yeah, and look, I'd love any questions people have got. I think I hope has been obvious in our conversations that this is, I guess, excites you and me, Hugh, because it's live and it's evolving and it feels very relevant. So any questions, provocations, challenges, would welcome those.
Thank you, mate. We'll get them up to your post box in the tree, something like that. Yeah. Nice. Take care, man.
Thanks, Hugh.
Thanks so much for lending us your ears. We really hope you enjoyed our conversation. And if you'd like to explore more around this topic or other shared interests, do visit us at www.managementfutures.co.uk. There you can find lots more really useful content in our resources section, including lots of cool things John, myself and the team here at MF have developed. Until next time, take care.